For decades, the science on this animal said the same thing. Jaguar attacks on humans are rare. Rare enough that researchers wrote it into the record as settled fact. Not like lions, not like tigers. Barely worth studying as a human threat at all. In 2025, a new study went back through every documented case in the Brazilian Amazon since 1950 and rewrote that completely. 84 attacks, 12 deaths. Nearly half of them with no provocation at all. No hunting, no cornering, no warning given. And when a jaguar attacks, it doesn't go for the throat the way a lion or a tiger does. It goes for the skull. The same bite that lets it crack open a caiman's head or punch straight through a turtle's shell is strong enough to do exactly the same thing to a person. That bite is not an exaggeration. Pound for pound, the jaguar has one of the most powerful bites of any cat on the planet. Some estimates put it at roughly 1,500 pounds per square inch at the back teeth. Tigers and lions can generate more raw force thanks to their larger jaws, but scaled to body size, nothing in the cat family hits harder. For context, the average human bite lands somewhere around 150 pounds per square inch. This animal generates 10 times that, concentrated through a tooth built specifically to punch through bone. A lion kills the way most big cats do. It clamps down on the throat and holds until the animal beneath it suffocates, a process that can take minutes. A jaguar skips that step entirely. It drives a canine tooth through the temporal bone of the skull, directly into the brain, and the fight is over before it starts. Researchers call it the cranial bite. It's a technique no other big cat on Earth regularly uses, because no other big cat's jaw has the raw power to pull it off. The anatomy behind it is specific. A jaguar's skull is shorter and wider than a lion's or a tiger's, built around unusually wide cheekbones that leave more room for the jaw muscles doing the actual work. More room means thicker muscle, and thicker muscle means more force, concentrated into a bite roughly 2 centimeters wide. Scientists measure this using something called bite force quotient, force adjusted for body size rather than raw numbers. By that measure, the jaguar beats every other cat alive: lion, tiger, leopard, all of them. Most cats avoid water. This one hunts in it. A jaguar will slip into a river without hesitation and swim after prey it can't outrun on land, strong enough to drag a kill as heavy as a full-grown cow while still swimming, and strong enough afterward to haul that same body up into the branches of a tree, out of reach of anything that might try to steal it. Caimans, close relatives of the crocodile, aren't safe in the water either. A jaguar will ambush one from above, pin it beneath the surface, and finish it with the same skull-driving bite it uses on land. When it does have to sprint, don't assume it's slow. In one GPS-tracked study in Belize, researchers clocked a hunting jaguar running close to 35 miles an hour, faster than Noah Lyle's top speed at the 2024 Olympics, the stretch of the race that made him the world's fastest man. The difference is that a jaguar isn't built to hold that speed. It's built to reach it instantly, from a dead stop, in the 2 or 3 seconds it takes to close the gap between hiding and striking. On land, it doesn't chase. It waits. Its eyes are built for the low light of dawn, dusk, and the forest floor, gathering roughly 6 times more light than a human eye can manage, close to the boost a soldier gets from a pair of night vision goggles. Part of why prey so rarely sees it coming until it's already too late to matter. The rosette pattern across a jaguar's coat, dark rings scattered over gold, breaks up its outline against dappled jungle light so completely that prey can walk within a few feet without noticing anything is there. No 2 jaguars share the same pattern. Researchers can identify individual animals from photographs the same way a detective reads a fingerprint. That precision isn't decoration. It's camouflage built to disappear at exactly the range where the skull bite works best, close enough that escape is no longer an option. Some jaguars take that invisibility even further. A single gene can flood their coat with so much dark pigment that the rosettes disappear entirely into what looks like solid black fur, visible only as a faint pattern in the right light. These animals are often called black panthers, a name people also use for melanistic leopards on the other side of the world, as if they were some separate, more mysterious species. They aren't. It's the same jaguar, same skull, same bite, just harder to see coming. Long before biologists measured any of this, the people who lived alongside jaguars already understood exactly what they were dealing with. To the Maya and the Aztec, the jaguar wasn't simply a predator. It was treated as a passage between the world of the living and the underworld, powerful enough that rulers wore its pelt and warriors trained specifically to fight and kill one as proof they belonged among the elite. That reverence wasn't superstition built from nothing. It was built from centuries of watching an animal that could kill almost anything in the forest and rarely be seen doing it. Go back to that number from 2025. 84 documented attacks in the Brazilian Amazon alone since 1950. And researchers believe the real number is higher because most of these incidents happen in remote communities that rarely make it into any official record at all. The people involved in that dataset weren't random. Of the 84 victims, the overwhelming majority, 71, were men, most of them working alone in rural areas, fishing, farming, clearing land, gathering forest products, the kind of subsistence work that puts a person in jaguar territory without warning and without backup. 8 were children, 4 were women, and the single clearest predictor of whether an attack turned fatal wasn't the size of the jaguar or the location. It was whether the victim was alone, and whether they had anything at all to fight back with. The jaguar rarely walks away clean either. In roughly half of the 84 cases, the animal responsible was killed during the attack or in the hours and days that followed, usually by relatives or neighbors of the victim. An attack on a person is, more often than not, a death sentence for the jaguar too. Every one of these encounters costs something on both sides of the bite. One case, published in a 2011 medical report from central Brazil, describes a young man attacked without warning, alone, in the kind of ordinary moment that becomes a case study only in hindsight. The jaguar seized his head directly in its jaws, the same restraining bite it uses to hold prey twice its size still. He survived, but only barely. Doctors who treated him documented fractures across the skull and the loss of brain tissue, injuries severe enough that his case is still cited in medical literature as an example of what a jaguar bite is physically capable of doing to a human skull. He lived because the bone absorbed some of the force before it reached anything vital, because people nearby heard the attack and drove the animal off with whatever they had on hand, and because a neurosurgeon reached him before the swelling in his brain became unmanageable. A second case in the same report ended differently, and it's the one researchers point to when they explain why this species is being reclassified as more dangerous than the record suggested. A jaguar tore into the side of a tent at night while its target slept inside, bit down on the back of the neck in the same restraining grip it uses on prey, and dragged the body out into the surrounding forest. There was no confrontation, no warning growl beforehand, no chance to react. Investigators classified it as a predatory attack, not a defensive one, meaning the animal wasn't reacting to a threat. It was hunting. The victim likely never fully woke up before it was already happening. Nearly half of all the attacks researchers found followed that same pattern. No provocation, no dogs, no hunters cornering the animal first. Just a person, alone, in a place a jaguar had already decided was its own. So, why did the science get this so wrong for so long? Partly because jaguars are elusive by nature, solitary, and mostly active at dawn and dusk, which makes them hard to study and even harder to catch in the act. And partly because, until recently, nobody had gone back and actually counted. Local news reports, hospital records, and word-of-mouth accounts from rural communities rarely reach international researchers. Many of the communities most exposed to jaguar attacks sit hours from the nearest hospital, let alone a research institution keeping formal records. An attack that would generate international headlines in a city might never leave the village where it happened. It took a dedicated 2025 review, built case by case from decades of records, to reveal a pattern that had simply been hiding in plain sight. Even Alan Rabinowitz, the biologist most responsible for jaguar conservation work across the Americas, described attacks on humans as rare in his own writing. He wasn't wrong about the animal's temperament. He was working with a fraction of the data that exists now. There's also a newer factor at play. As farmland and roads push deeper into jaguar territory across South America, jaguars are losing the prey and space that once kept them away from people entirely. Livestock becomes an easier meal than a fleeing peccary. Human settlements creep closer to hunting grounds that used to be untouched. The animal isn't changing. The overlap is. That overlap is happening against a shrinking backdrop. Across the Americas, an estimated 170,000 jaguars remain, scattered across a range that has shrunk to roughly half of what it used to be. Many of those remaining subpopulations are small and isolated by farmland and roads, and several are considered at serious risk of disappearing entirely. The same habitat loss pushing jaguars toward livestock and rural communities is also the reason the species as a whole is under pressure. The conflict driving these attacks and the crisis threatening the animal's survival are, in a very real sense, the exact same problem. Strip away the danger, and the jaguar is still one of the most physically overbuilt animals in the Americas. It's solitary almost its entire life, a territorial hunter that marks a range stretching dozens of square miles and defends it against any other jaguar that crosses the line. Long assumed to be a strictly nocturnal animal, tracking data has shown it's just as active by daylight, with hunting activity actually peaking at dawn and dusk rather than deep in the night. Its diet includes more than 80 different species, from fish and turtles to deer, tapirs, capybaras, and, on rare occasions, anacondas nearly as long as the jaguar itself. Most big cats specialize. A jaguar improvises. If the forest offers armored prey, it develops the bite to crack armor. If the rivers offer easier hunting, it learns to fish, sometimes flicking its tail across the surface of the water to draw curious fish within striking range before pinning them with a paw. That range of technique, land, water, armored, unarmored, is part of why the species survives in habitats as different as dense rainforest, dry scrubland, and mountain forest, anywhere it can find enough of something to eat. Male territories alone can stretch well over 100 square miles in some regions, more ground than the entire city of Washington, D.C. A male will patrol and defend that entire range against any other male that crosses into it. Cubs stay with their mother for close to 2 years, longer than almost any other cat, learning to hunt by watching before they're ever expected to make a kill of their own. Litters are small, usually 1 to 4 cubs, and mortality before adulthood is high. Males take no part in raising them, and will kill cubs that aren't their own if they encounter them inside a rival's territory, a pattern that pushes females to keep their young hidden and constantly moving during those first vulnerable months. Unlike smaller cats, which mostly rely on hisses, purrs, and short-range calls, a jaguar can produce a deep, rasping roar that carries for miles through dense forest, along with a series of grunts, coughs, and low growls used to mark territory or signal to other jaguars without ever needing to meet face-to-face. Combined with scent markings and claw scrapes left on trees throughout its range, a single jaguar can make its presence known across dozens of square miles without another animal ever laying eyes on it. And this isn't only a South American animal. For most of American history, it wasn't foreign at all. Jaguars once ranged across the entire American Southwest, from California through Arizona and New Mexico into Texas, with historical records placing them as far east as Louisiana. Hunting campaigns backed by the federal government pushed the species out of the country by the middle of the 20th century. The last known female jaguar on U.S. soil was shot in the 1960s. But a border isn't much of a wall for an animal that can swim rivers and cross mountains. In November 2011, a mountain lion hunter named Donnie Fenn was riding through Arizona's Whetstone Mountains with his young daughter when his hounds treed something he wasn't expecting. Not a mountain lion, a jaguar, roughly 2 years old, that had wandered more than 100 miles north out of a reserve in Mexico. Researchers came to know him as El Jefe, the boss. For the next several years, trail cameras tracked him through the Santa Rita Mountains outside Tucson, the only confirmed wild jaguar living on U.S. soil at the time. Then, in 2015, he vanished from every camera in the range. Conservationists didn't know if he'd died, been killed, or simply moved on. 6 years later, in 2021, a camera trap deep in Sonora, Mexico, caught him again. Alive, older, still moving. Since then, a handful of other individual jaguars have turned up on camera along the same borderlands, most recently at a remote Arizona watering hole in December 2025. No breeding population has taken hold. Not yet. But an animal built to crush bone with a single bite, capable of surviving in nearly any terrain it can swim or climb into, has never fully left American soil. It just stopped being seen for a while. There's still a lot researchers can't answer. Nobody knows whether the small trickle of jaguars crossing into Arizona will ever become a real breeding population again, or whether border infrastructure will cut off that path for good. Nobody has a reliable count of how many attacks in remote parts of South America go entirely unrecorded, buried in communities without the infrastructure to report them at all, which means the real total is almost certainly higher than 84. Nobody knows exactly how much of the recent rise in conflict comes from genuine behavioral change versus simply better reporting, now that researchers are finally looking. And after decades of being told this was one of the safer big cats, nobody yet knows how many other assumptions about jaguar behavior are about to be corrected the same way this one just was. Go back to that number the science held onto for decades. Rare. Barely worth studying. Not like lions, not like tigers. It took 75 years of records and one thorough study to prove that wrong. 84 attacks, 12 deaths, half of them with no warning at all, and roughly half of the jaguars responsible never surviving the encounter either. The animal that carried that reputation, quiet, elusive, statistically almost harmless, was never actually behaving any differently. It was hunting the same way it always has, with the same bite that can crack a caiman's skull, in the same forests it has occupied for longer than the studies that finally caught up to it. The jaguar was never the gentle exception the record made it out to be. It just spent longer than most predators not getting caught.